But Shiprah and Puah, if the Israelites are really any kind of a numerical threat to Egypt at this point, clearly they are going to need more than 2 midwives. So likely what we're seeing here are the women who were the heads of a Hebrew birthing guild. These are essentially the union leaders. And they are called in and given orders by the king to disseminate to the other women who did this work. So what happens? Well, the text is pretty silent here, which leaves us to fill in the gaps imaginatively. And to do that, I want to read you a longer section from Wil Gafney, who is one of my favorite black women scholars reading the Hebrew Bible right now. This is from her book, Womanist Madras. But this is how she imagines these two, Shiprah and Puah, leaving Pharaoh's court. Shiprah and Puah call all the birthing women to assemble, telling their overseers that they are passing on Pharaoh's instructions. And perhaps one Egyptian lingers longer than the others, but Puah shoos him out with the ancient womanist refrain, "This is women's business." And he leaves. Hundreds of women come to the place of Shiprah's tent. Many bring their daughters, their granddaughters, nieces that they are apprenticing in the practice. Some are pregnant, others are nursing. It takes more than a day for everyone to gather, to eat, and to rest from their journeys, and there is talk, shop talk, women's wisdom shared, experiences and new techniques, herbs to stop bleeding, and herbs to begin labor, and teas to increase milk production, ways to limit pregnancies. Finally, Shiprah speaks. She tells them Pharaoh's words, and the women gasp. Some mutter, others shout. Some of the children are frightened, but Shiprah and Puah shush them and call for calm. Shiprah begins to prophesy. God has brought our people a mighty long way. I do not believe that God has brought us this far to leave us. Do not fear this Pharaoh or his warriors, nor his war horses or chariots. God will blow them away like smoke in the wind. In our days, before our eyes, God will break the back of empire and wash away its might. God will rise up one of our sons to lead us out of this house of slavery. And our hands and our wombs will do God's work. We will deliver the deliverer, and we will keep him safe until the day God calls. Shiprah takes her seat, and Puah now speaks. This is what we'll do. Deliver the babies. Hide as many of the boys as you can. Raise others as girls. Do not worry about the Egyptians. They will not come to the house of a woman to check. They cannot even imagine that we would defy the Pharaoh whom they revere as a living God. The women leave the convocation of midwives. Days, weeks, then months go by, and babies are born, but Pharaoh is too busy to think about the Hebrew birthing women. Finally, someone mentions that the Hebrew people are still growing, in spite of Pharaoh's command, so he summons them back to explain themselves. And here, back to Exodus verse 19, the midwives answered Pharaoh, "Look, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives can even get there." Now here, they're using Pharaoh's prejudice against him. The word that's translated vigorous here is actually something more like brutish or animalistic. They're not refined like Egyptian women. So they're playing him here. And it seems like it works because the next verse, all we read is, God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, God gave them families of their own. Now, families here might mean families. More likely, what it means is lineages, dynasties, long stories of their own descendants from today. But I like what Gafney says here. She says, the liberation of the Israelite people begins with Shiprah and Puah. They are the mothers of a revolution waged first by women. Here's what's important about that. We get no indication in the text that Shiprah or Puah were ever involved with, that they ever delivered Moses, because that's not the point of the story. In fact, it's precisely the opposite. See, the point here is that when we know where we come from and we live out of that grounding narrative, even at great risk to ourselves, we can inspire great things in other people around us, and that is how revolution starts. Shiprah and Puah aren't named in the text of Exodus because they saved Moses. Shiprah and Puah are named in the text of Exodus because they preserved the hope that would be needed when God finally called on Moses. And sometimes that is the much harder work.